Hey, well, welcome back to the Zeitcast. I'm so happy that you're here. And I tell you what, I've already been talking for a bit, catching up with my friend Scott Erickson. He's really a special person to me. And the conversation we've been having is special. I feel like he's just the kind of soul that just sort of breaks you open. So I'm just in the mood because I feel like sometimes it's just the way I can be, maybe because I'm polite or something or another, kind of wade into things. I don't feel like wading into this at all. I'm going to tell you, a lot of you, first of all, you know Scott's work in terms of his art as a touring painter, a performance storyteller, the way that he so beautifully and so creatively, really curates. He brings so many mediums together. I love all of the ways that Scott is able to tell stories. I know it was a significant night for me in a lot of different ways when he came to Oklahoma City a couple years ago on his Say Yes tour. And I want to say more in a moment about what that tour meant to me. But before saying anything else, and I'm not trying to make him blush right out of the gate, but his new book, Say Yes, Discover the Surprising Life Beyond the Death of a Dream. Y'all, I'm telling you, I don't know a higher compliment I could give to a book. I really believe that this is a book that saves people's lives. Like, does it just make your life better? Does it just enrich things? I feel like this is a life saving book to read. And I can tell you this has been a life saving message for me. Scott, you have such a beautiful spirit. And this is a gorgeous, gorgeous book. And I'm so
Man,
happy
thanks,
to have you
friend.
here today, my friend from Austin. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh man, that's you did make me blush. Thank you. I mean, it was a real. It meant a lot to get a wonderful uh, message from you on my phone, and just being like, because probably in the same field. We both get sent a lot of books, and
Sure.
sometimes it's really hard, and it's hard to say to people like, I just don't have capacity. So
Yeah.
for you to take the time to read it and be moved by it, express you're like, I was crying while I was reading these sections.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
great. And I also think, real like it is our journeys are similar in some senses, where it's
Yes.
just like I could see
Yes.
you finding yourself in the pages of this book, even though
Ooh,
I try to write it for, kind of being broad for anybody's experiences, but it's like
right.
these are my particulars and those are your particulars too. So I get
Yes.
it. Yeah.
It does hit me in some really particular ways, and yet I feel like it's such a universal story too. As I mean, a resurrection story for one. But I tell you,
Yeah.
maybe this is a good place to start. I had the sense reading the book that I did when you were touring the Say Yes dates,
Uh-huh.
even before, which was of. And if anybody needs this context, so you and I think it'd be fair to say, I don't know exactly what it is that we do. I don't know exactly where it is that we come from, but it's the same.
Yes.
We
Yes.
do something the same, and we come from the same kind of people and spaces. So that whatever kind of evangelical-ish places that
Uh-huh.
we come from,
Yeah.
and and you
Yeah.
still are very, in a wonderful way, connected with church communities, and
Yeah.
I mean, faith is an important part of your work, like all of that. Um, I remember thinking then and feeling it again reading the book that it's so real life, it's
Mm.
so tender, it's so vulnerable,
Yeah.
it's so fragile and human in a way that's like, oh, that you so rarely get. And I don't mean that as a judgment, but you so rarely get in those kind of spaces. That in a wonderful way, it's initially shocking, like, oh, we're actually talking about that. We're actually talking about suicide. We're actually talking about the moment where you break sitting on the toilet or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's just a kind of it's just a way that something that in sacred spaces I feel like is all too often lacking, of just a really tender, vulnerable. This is real life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, I think that's my superpower, maybe as an Enneagram 4 and as our artist, is to just be really authentic and
Yeah.
honest. But also, like, I'm not trying to like I'm yeah, how do I say this? There's nothing that's like, let me set myself up as a deeply spiritual person, but like
Mhm.
I for me, I'm like, I want to know if this isn't real or not so I can just move on with my life. But for
Mm.
me, I found that these
Yeah.
stories
Wow.
and these experiences and these liturgies, communities, practices, they are life-giving and they're very
Yes.
real to me.
Yes.
And I'm always like disturbed or frustrated when I feel like the communities that practice these things aren't
Yeah.
willing to go into the hard conversations, because I'm like, well, that's exactly what you should be in, because
That's
this is
right.
where it's necessary. And this stuff in this book started off as like a my own life practices.
Mm.
Then it became like a bit of a talk, and then it became like a show, and then it became a book. But
Mm.
in when I was kind of putting together the show, like from the talk to the show, I was like, I want to make one of my muses was I want to make a church service about suicide, because
Mm.
I've never been to one. And
Mhm.
I knew that if it was so boring, like a lot of church services are, and you felt like you wanted to kill yourself while you were in it,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
would be missing the point. And it was kind of that joke that led me to go, oh, it has to be funny. It has to be
Uh,
like a comedy and weird and a story form, and have some art and some singing and all the kind of things that and that's where the liturgy came in. I was like, oh, kind of
mm.
like a sacred ceremony. It has all of these elements,
Yes.
and yet it is like a church service, but it's not. It's like a
Yeah.
show, but it has the elements, because I think really like the elements of a liturgy are the elements of human transformation that
Yes.
have stood the
Yes.
time since the human existence. We all know when we tell stories, it changes us. When we sing songs or music, changes us. When we feel like we've been released from our shame or burden, that
Mhm.
transforms us. When we share our gifts and help others, that's what transforms us. So all of those elements are in the show, but just in kind of artistic ways.
Yeah.
Um, because I was like, I want it to be about these real conversations, which are messy. And as
Yeah.
I put that together, and there's a big part in the book and in the show, which is just like, and I don't say it in this many words, but like suicide is very confronting to religion, because
Yes. Yes.
at least in Western religion, it confronts the product pitch narrative, which is
Mm.
you're like, Jesus is the answer to your problems.
Right.
Now, the problem with that is, in my experience, when I was deeply depressed and having some suicidal ideation, I was like, I have Jesus in my heart, but that
Yeah.
doesn't make me not want my heart to stop right now.
Yes. Yes.
That's not whatever Jesus in my heart means isn't working.
Yes.
And I've had
Yes.
friends. I had my friend Charlie last year took her own life, and
Mm.
she was somebody I went to church with. So it's
Mm.
like, and we had. I was talking to, remember a couple years ago there was like a string of pastors that all took their own lives. Like within a
Yeah.
year, there was like 4,
Yeah.
and so it's like the product pitch isn't working. And
Right.
nor do I even think that it's supposed to be a product pitch. I don't believe in God because I believe God is the answer to my problems.
Mm.
Like tooth whitening toothpaste is the answer to my yellow
Mhm.
teeth, or
Mhm.
weed killer is the answer to my garden weeds.
Yeah.
It's like God isn't the answer to bad narratives, a limited perspective. I mean, I think God is part of the solution in that, but we got to get more nuance. I just feel like a lot of communities just like leave it at God and don't get into the more difficult things, which is like, we have to talk about how you're forming narratives
Mm.
and what you're
Mm.
saying to yourself. We got to talk about that we live in a massive culture of comparison,
That's right.
and that religion has not escaped from. In fact, can just propagate and be a part of too.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting in transforming this into a book, because it really landed on that last section is about like, what does it mean to be a resurrection?
Yes. Yes.
Like being somebody who's gone through some kind of death, some kind of ending,
Mhm.
and then come out on the other side. And really going, what is the gift of resurrection? Is it
Mm.
escapism? Because suicide, the conversation, and suicide is on a spectrum. So we could say giving up, because you
Yeah.
can like binge watch something every night or
Yeah.
drink endlessly to numb the pain. Like you can kick out of your life and still be alive.
Yeah.
But like, I was like, I think suicide is a form of escapism,
Mhm.
which end times obsession is a form of
Ooh,
escapism, which, there's
Lord.
like all these kinds of forms of escapism. But I was like, well, what do we expect
Mm.
from resurrection? Like,
Mm.
is it to escape this, or is it, and I would say it's a whole new way of seeing all of
Mm.
this. And this comes out of my Christian tradition, is to go, well, is that resurrection available now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I
That's
be a
right.
resurrection now? Can I receive the gift of a different perspective on
Yeah.
everything now? And then when I started seeing it that, I was like, I think this is what Jesus
Hmm.
is leading us into. I think this is what these saints, women, and men throughout these stories and in the larger church tradition or just our world tradition of people who are faithful are speaking to. And so that was kind of all of those things.
I've
So
never
there's a lot of
thought
things we just
of it.
covered there.
No, it's so good. And I mean, I don't. Well, one of the things I love most about the book, I love this whole idea, and you do that artistically, you do it verbally too, but like this kind of the idea of there being a spectrum of giving up, and that
Hmm.
suicide might be the furthest end, the most extreme end. But I
Yeah.
love that idea of yielding to addictions, whatever, just to kind of check yourself out of your life. How all that just kind of this where you are in the spectrum of giving up. I don't think
Yeah.
I've ever heard anybody say before, and I love it so much because I believe it's true, that for like evangelical Christians, end time scenarios is not any different from alcoholism, cocaine, the way other people use relationships or whatever, just a way of numbing and
Yeah.
checking out and not having to contend with your own life. I don't know how to deal. I don't know how to talk to my kids. I don't know how to deal with what's happening in my most fundamental relationships. So,
Yeah.
escapist scenario. And it's like, I
Yeah.
love, I've never heard those things grouped together. And that's so fair. And that's so good. I,
Yeah.
a thousand things in that I want to ask you more about, but I just love, maybe to me, it feels still so revolutionary and so important because I thought that's so often what people in the church will say. And maybe this feels important to me now because as a person who I do think is kind of an optimist by nature, hopeful by nature, I've also spent the last couple years, I've dealt with despair on a level that I have not dealt with it before and felt this. And
Yeah.
also, like, as a person who really does deeply believe in Jesus and whatever judgments anybody wants to render about me or whatever, I mean, like, I do believe I've had real experiences of God's
Yeah.
presence and the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit and all the things that you'd want to say. But I just feel like so often I still hear people say, man, I hate that you're sad. I hate that you're
Huh.
feeling that way. But you know what? Jesus is the answer. And if you'll just trust Jesus, give your life to Jesus, pray to Jesus, whatever, then all this is going to go away. I still feel like that's the fundamental posture for so many people. It's like this attitude of so long as you have Jesus, you're going to be fine. And I just
Yeah.
feel like it's important permission for people to feel a word for people to hear. You may actually have Jesus. You might have a real viable connection with Jesus
Yeah.
and not be fine.
And maybe not be fine.
Yeah.
This is it's like the centerpiece in the show. It's like the middle of the show and in the book where I talk about it's this. And for those watching the video, you can see this. Those
Mm,
listening, there's an image of it's like a jug that looks like a heart and it's pouring, but there's this glass moved aside. And I have this line that I say where I talk about this story with like John and Peter and Jesus, and
mhm.
Peter's like, well, what about him? And this kind of like comparison. And realizing I was like, you could be at the church service doing all of the things,
Yeah.
clapping, singing all the songs, but looking around and going, God, do you love them more than me?
Ooh,
Because like
right.
their life looks awesome and my life really sucks right now. And we're
Yeah.
doing the same thing. Do you
Yeah.
have favorites? And
Mm,
then my whole thing is to go like, see, love, God, John penned God is love. Love wants to pour itself out into you,
mhm,
but you can't
mhm,
receive love if you secretly hate who love made you to be,
mhm.
because your body, your life is the only container you've been given to receive love in. And if you're
Yeah.
trying to trade it out all the time, and I think there's this deeply sacred spiritual thing where it's like, you can have Jesus, but if you secretly hate who Jesus made you to
Ooh,
be,
yeah. Wow. Wow.
what does it mean to have Jesus?
Yeah.
Like there is no way to experience the love of God except through the gift of your incarnation.
Mm,
And one of the
mm.
things that we all have to do, and maybe it takes a long time, maybe it is something that happens more middle age, the gift of your 40s is you kind of receive the gift of yourself, but like
That's true.
we have to go, this is the life I've been given and I'm going to say yes to it with
Yeah.
all of my vulnerabilities and limitations. But if you're like at the thing, just going, I can't wait till God makes me better. I can't wait
Right.
till God makes me something other than I am now.
Right.
Like, and I'm not saying about transformation. I'm really wary about like, I think, and I got this from my friend Nadia Boltz-Weber. She's like, cults are built on virtues.
Mm,
Cults are built on like, we're going to make you the best version of
wow.
yourself. We're going to better, better, better. Where she's like, I'm in with the Christian message still because it's built on grace, because it
Ooh,
just says
yeah.
like, it's actually
Mm,
about, it's not about like what you're going to do, it's
yeah.
about what's being done to you
Mm,
by God.
mm,
And I have taken that and said, I don't think the goal of your spiritual journey is to make you a better person. I think it's to make you a whole person.
yes. Yes.
And that holistic nature, I think, is really what God is doing.
Mm,
But
mm.
it that is a different conversation than you just need Jesus and it'll be better.
Right.
Like
That's right.
like I think Jesus, the front facing picture of God, is part of that holistic thing.
Yeah.
But that's going to come into like receiving the gift of our life, receiving,
Yes.
grace in our limitations and our weaknesses,
Yes.
receiving a new set of eyes to see things differently, and then to say yes to the miracle of life that we've been given to walk in. And
Yeah.
that say yes has a lot of different layers
Mm,
to
mm, mm,
to
mm,
it means like kind of saying yes to where you're at, saying
mm.
yes to the unique way you can walk forward, but it's also like saying yes to the gift of being alive and existing, and
Yes.
saying yes to the fact that it's not all up to you and you're in a
Yeah.
co-creative kind of journey.
Yeah.
And so, and because for me, why I keep in with, I'm not trying to necessarily be a spiritual leader as much as I just kind of think all conversations eventually hit
Right.
spiritual conversations. And so
Sure.
I'm not going the way of where people are like, there's nothing and we don't have to talk about it. I'm like, I think that's a component we have to bring
Yeah.
into this conversation, because and I think I listed in the book where I say, I was working with a therapist and she was like, in order to deal with your depression, you should start some kind of physical activity. So I started
Mm.
running, but it was on one of those runs. I was like, well, why the hell am I running anyways? Like, I was like, I do feel
That's
better,
funny.
but who
Right.
cares if I
Right.
just think life is a curse?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had to like
Yeah.
go, is life a curse? Is life something that's happening against me, or is life
Yeah.
happening for me, and am I participating with it?
Mm.
Yeah. Those are the things that we have to get to in, well, then how am I going to take step forward in
Mhm.
accomplishing something I want to do? There's layers of, from practicality to like
Yeah.
meaning and why and all of that stuff, which I know you know about, and probably all of you listening.
Oh, well, no. And well, first of all, I don't know. Anything I know about, I feel like it's always way too much up here and not enough. I mean, in terms of being embedded in my life and in my body. I'm thinking, Scott, as you're saying that, about how, I don't know, it's just such a I love your example about running and then still hitting that existential, like, but why am I running? Why is I feel better? But what's the point of feeling better?
Yeah.
It just, to me, it just shows how denial of these fundamental questions doesn't work. And it's one of the things I love most about your book, and I feel like what you've been doing these last few years is forcing people to sit with these things that actually are happening in their soul. These are the real questions that
Yeah.
are keeping you up late at night. This is what you actually wonder about. And it just seems like we just have so many just sort of strategic forms of denial. I don't want to ever, there's no judgment on anybody else's story. I don't know what anybody else is thinking, but
Hmm.
my heart was broken all over again when you talked about Anthony Bourdain in the book,
Yeah.
because also somebody, for me, I don't know, I think for anybody who does anything creative, like there's somebody who's just living the life. I mean, who's carved out their own
Yeah.
space in the world, is doing something that's utterly new and different, and would appear to be having a great time, like all
Yeah.
the things. But I just wonder how often people get to a place where they feel like they need to kind of end everything, because ultimately it's like, I don't know, when you're forced to wrangle with those questions in private, and you feel like there's no place to vent it, there's no way to talk about it honestly. Maybe even everybody in your life, and that, would tell you, oh, you can't think things like that because your life is great, you have all these things. So then, I don't know, it
Yeah.
just feels like there's so much pain that comes from people just feeling like they have to push these things down. You think that's fair?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and with Anthony Bourdain, what hit me, and the movie Roadrunner came out
Yeah.
last year, and it gave a little bit of insight. At least, there's nothing like totally about like this is what he was thinking in that night, so we don't know. But like it, when he died, I think I was like, it really confronted in me. I was like, he kind of has everything that I want, and if
Mm.
he doesn't even want to be in his life, what makes me think that I would want to be in my life when I got there too?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just knew intuitively that I was like, so there's something else than fame, accomplishment, success.
Yes.
And these are tales as old as time. It's Beauty and the Beast, right? Like we all know this, but we're like, well, what else should we go for?
Right.
And I think that there is this interesting mix of like, I'm ambitious and I want
Yeah.
to accomplish things, but I have started to understand, and through my practices, that I've realized I was like, but there has to be this internal work as well, because that external destination will never give you the internal scaffolding to
That's
hold it
right.
all together.
Yeah.
So, and you could very much like keep moving, which I think he was doing a lot, which was like just keep moving all the time and not dealing with like deep, deep
Mm-hmm.
pain and deep, deep things. I do think that like one of the, and I know talking about suicide's really intense, but if we view it as a spectrum, we could take lesser ones with addiction or habits or drinking, video games, whatever it is.
Sure.
One of the first places we have to start with a suicidal ideation is letting somebody share their pain.
Mm. Yeah.
Like that is the place, because suicide is an internal conversation that you're not letting anybody else in
Yeah.
on. But when you can bring it out into the open,
Mm-hmm.
for one, you'll find out others have felt the same way as you.
Yeah.
And so then you don't feel like, oh, well, other people have gone through this. And then also others can go, there's ways to navigate what you're thinking.
Yes.
I think like when you are like, I want my life to end, it's not that you want to stop existing. You just want the life you're existing in to be over.
That's right.
You want to change a way of existing.
Yes. Yes.
And there's ways to do that don't look like you ending your life.
Yeah.
So that's really intense to bring it in under the umbrella of suicide. But if we were just talking about like lost dreams or things didn't turn out, or like a marriage didn't work out, or a kid didn't, work out, or whatever it is, like, the first step is to being able to find solidarity in the pain. And that is the grief. And that's kind of what you're alluding to earlier, which maybe we're just a real culture that's very uncomfortable with letting grief take its time.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Jesus is kind of like, I know you're grieving, but if you just got Jesus, grief would be over. And it's like, maybe this is the spiritual journey, is grief takes a long time.
Yes.
But we really need to find that we're not alone in that there's actually, it's probably one of the things that we relate to mostly as human beings, is the pain we're experiencing of loneliness, of things not the way we expected, or particularities of places you find yourself in.
Yes.
But I would, I like, that's part of the book, is going, a dream is a version of your life that has no vulnerabilities in it.
Right.
So it has to die, because the only way forward in your life is through your weaknesses and limitations. In fact, those become not the things that are keeping you from going a direction, but they uniquely affect what takes shape in front of you.
Yeah.
And for me, I started tuning in. I was like, I think I'm much more of a performing artist, and I'd like to try to do that. But I found myself at like 40 going, I have kids and I just can't do all the things. I can't be like 18 doing like a 12-minute,
Right.
like a midnight spot at a bar
Yeah.
for 4 drunk people. That's not what I can do right now. So I had to go, well, I have to move forward where I'm at now. And I'm going to have these particularities of limitations and things I have to deal with. Even now, when I'm like planning this year for touring, it's like, it's maybe 2 to 3 dates a month, maybe. And it's like a Thursday night, I'm like, I'll leave Thursday morning, go somewhere, do a thing, come back Friday, be home for the weekend.
Yeah.
That's maybe not forever, but that's just where I'm at right now.
Sure.
And it's what I can do, because I don't want to lose my wife,
Right.
and I don't want my kids to hate me.
Yeah.
And I want to be there for that, because those things are just as valuable as how fun it feels to be successful on a stage,
Absolutely.
like, so anyways, that we could get into like the we have to start with our pain, because the pain is about so much disappointment about how things didn't work out the way I expected. But then but moving from there is like, it gives us a new possibility. It's like, so now that that died,
Mm,
what can you now do that idea died, or that
mm.
expectation died? What does that free you to do? And I think that's endlessly interesting to me.
We're obviously free flowing here, and there's a lot I want to ask about. So this, probably the sequence I would ask this before, but I thought with you saying that, I mean, I think I told you that was one of the sections of the book that really moved me, because I feel like I'm 43, ooh, soon to be 44. I think there's
Hey
so
man,
many
welcome. I'm
ways.
44.
That's amazing. Well, there's so many ways that I feel like I'm just now figuring out what I want to be when I grow up, and
Yeah.
things that are just snapping into place. And oh yeah, I really don't think I'm this. I think I'm more that. But that
Yeah.
that exact same process of like, oh well, I can't. You can't just shift gears. I'm not. I'm
Yeah.
not 18. I can't get whatever. So that was actually one of the things that really moved me the most deeply, is even just your candor about just even dealing with that struggle, like the kind of, is it too late to
Hmm.
shift gears? Is it too late to be something else than what I've been before, or I've been known before? It's like, because I think especially the idea is that resurrection takes the form of a very different kind of dream than what your life has been before. Well, a lot of people, like, it's maybe not even they couldn't envision it on some level, but it's just scared to death in terms of, well, a lot has gone into what we've built before, and the idea of
Yeah.
trying to be something new, and there's
Yeah. Yeah.
logistics to all this, like it's just terrifying.
Yeah. It's what the argument told me is, it's embarrassing.
Mm,
It's embarrassing to
yeah.
start something new when you're supposed to be an expert at this age.
Yes. Yes.
And that's real particular to me. But I said that to somebody, and they're like, embarrassing is the perfect word,
Yeah.
because it is like, and I said this a few times in the Say Yes show, and then somebody told me a story, and I was like, it's not coming across right. But like, here's my example. It's like, because my father-in-law does this, when you see a woman or a man in their 50s playing at a farmer's market, you're not like, that's success. You know what I'm saying? You're not like, they are living that dream,
Mm,
even though they might have so much joy doing it, which my
sure.
father-in-law does have.
Mm,
You're not like, oh, to start playing music at 50 and then your first gigs are at farmer's market. It looks embarrassing.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, and maybe it is, to a
Mm,
certain kind of expectation.
mm,
I think the real pivot is, what is the transformational journey you'd like to go on?
yes.
For
Yeah.
sure, when I started trying to do speaking things more, I for sure did it for 5 people
Mm,
in Grand Rapids, Michigan. 5 people one night, 6 people the next night.
wow.
4 people in a living room in Southern California. Like, I definitely had tiny shows, like
Yeah.
embarrassing shows. But the question in that embarrassing moment was like, well, do you want to do this because of them, or do you want to do this because of you,
Ooh,
or what you believe in?
mm,
And I like performed the hell out of those,
mm,
because I was like, I believe this. That helped. I was trained as a teacher. In one of our classes, we learned that like, you're the one who's going to carry the enthusiasm about what you're learning. You're
right.
always the one, and you'll bring everybody on board if you carry that. So
Mm,
I learned that early on. But like, I also do think there's kind of like and this is just a metaphor, but it seems like the universe is like, I see what I see what you're trying to do. Well, I'm going to give you these very humble starting spots,
yeah. Yeah.
and we'll just see what kind of character you have
Yeah.
in those. It's like, I think the universe is kind of looking for like, how much do you want this? And there'll be tests along the way. And then at some point it's like, all right, yeah, here's a few more, or here's an opportunity. Here's something you weren't in charge of. That's the unexpected journey that we're going, is like, when you set yourself to something, there are so many things, like an email or a phone call, that you don't know what's going to happen, that might change everything. And you can't, your calculating mind can't figure that out, because it's not up to you. And what I'm submitting is that, like, the giver of your life, has put a path of desire in you to walk.
Yes.
And that path in the future is very mysterious. When you look in your past, you're like, I kind of see it. I kind of see I'm on a path.
Yeah.
But as you walk forward, you contribute to that path. Unforeseen things will happen along the way, and that is the kind of co-creative nature of your
Mm.
life. But you can stop walking that path because of your despair, your heartbreak, and these are very real things.
Yeah.
Also, what's surprising is despair and heartbreak sometimes become the way in which they become a vulnerability in which you bring light into the world.
Mm.
And that was that shipwreck
Yeah.
lighthouse story that I had in
Yes.
there. It
Yes.
was like,
Which I love.
those become the things. So it's all very mysterious, and trying to like lay it out. There's not a plan as much as like the plan is you have to say yes to yourself, and there's something before you. And I feel like I'm just rambling because we're
No,
talking about a lot of stuff,
no,
but there's a lot there.
I tell you what, though, to your earlier point, and I don't mean to like derail here, but it just for me
No, let's pivot.
becomes so profound. This idea of that any form of resurrection. I'll put it like this, and I haven't talked about this in a minute, but for a while I feel like I was talking about a lot. Probably one of the books that most shaped my life. Catherine Dowling Singh wrote this book, The Grace in Dying, and she was a PhD hospice worker. Interesting because she's became Buddhist, but background, but also remained Episcopal, and so she was very interested in the intersection of all those things. Anyway, I walked with hundreds of people through the dying process, and that book is, I mean, I think it's one of those profound things I've read. But for me, this was one of the central insights: is that her whole idea of the grace in dying is that if people are given time to die, if there's actually a dying process,
Yeah.
that for all that's so terrible about it, when your body starts to shut down and people have to take care of you in these very basic ways that are so awful,
Yeah.
that the reason why almost everybody, whether it's for a short period or long period, comes to this place of just unprecedented kind of liberation, like freedom, like whatever,
Yeah.
right close to the end,
Yeah.
is because they kind of go through the path of humiliation in a way to where, I mean, ego's just gone. It's just gone. And while you're still kind of fighting it, then it's hell. But once you're kind of go through that, where it's like go
Yeah.
through the path of humiliation and actually embrace it, I feel like that's a lot of
Yeah.
her idea of where the grace in dying comes, is that you're kind of past
Yeah.
worried about how you're going to look.
Yes. Wow. That's amazing. I wish I would have read that book before I read this one. But I picked up on that from Bronnie Ware,
Mm,
who wrote The 5 Regrets of the Dying, a
yes,
viral blog
yes,
post that became a book. But
yeah,
she said, she didn't name it as path of humiliation, but that's so true. It's like a death of the ego, a death of expectations. And then on the other side, you're just willing to receive the gift of being here and the gift of being a contribution, everything. Like, and that's why in the last part of the book I talk about having a death practice, which is because, like, if you were to go, oh, I'm dying tomorrow,
hmm,
the next meal you would eat, you'd be like, this is so good.
right,
Even if it was
right,
just like a crappy hamburger from
yes,
McDonald's, because you would be like, what a gift. And then you would notice the light reflecting on the window of your car and you'd be like, what a
yeah,
gift.
right,
And then you would like, somebody would like hug you and be like, what a gift hugs are.
yeah,
You would just, because you knew, when you knew you were going to lose it all, you would be like, everything is a gift.
mm,
And I think the wisdom that can come at having a death practice
mm,
is to help change your perspective, to see what a gift it is
mm,
to receive the miracle of living.
mm,
I agree that the miracle sucks sometimes.
right,
It really does. And I am a white heterosexual man
yeah,
and I have a lot of privilege. And so the miracle doesn't suck a lot for me at times. Like,
right, no,
I
sure,
understand. I'm very aware of that. But like, I think the real question is like, you could spend your whole miracle hating it,
mm,
or you could start saying yes to it.
mm,
And what does it mean to say yes to
mm,
the miracle of the life you're given?
mm,
And could you start, man, that path of humiliation is real strong,
yeah,
because if you were allowed yourself to go through that, could you receive the gift of being alive on the other side? And what a tremendous way that would be to live. This is what hopefully I have another 40 years in me.
yeah,
Um, But and what I really wanted to know was like, can I take that wisdom that comes at the end of life,
Yes.
that real
Yeah.
exuberance of living, and could I try to apply
Right.
that now?
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm interested in, is like, because I would like to live that way if I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what are the elements of what's happening there that we could slowly do there? But man, the path of humiliation,
Dude.
that's not fun.
Dowling
And
even
and
connect.
that might be something that is like happens to you more than you choose. I
I
mean, you could
believe it.
choose to do, yeah,
I believe it's something more that happens to you than something to choose. Just like, I think a
yeah,
lot of it, like take up your cross. I think a lot of it is like a lot of your crosses are kind of chosen for us. Dowling Singh
mm,
actually takes it that way, that when Jesus says, lose your life to find it, which he uses directly to kind of say like that, she thinks that's kind of what it is what would it look like to live with the qualities of the dying while still alive is losing your life to
yeah,
find it. It's just,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
endlessly on your thing about even having a death practice. And you've been working on this material, living this material for a while. What
yeah,
does that look like for you right now? Because I feel like it's such a fine line between there's a good kind of soberness of living with the awareness of death and like, yeah,
yeah.
let's
Does it lead to
save it
nihilism?
forever, but also
Yeah,
not live like the endless, like how to
yeah,
not like carry that like too heavy. I mean, you've been carrying this idea around for a while now. So what does
yeah,
that kind of death
yeah,
practice look like for you now, especially after you've been trying it for a minute?
yeah, yeah. It's been a practice that I've had for 4 years,
Hmm.
and in the show, it's very theatrical, as show should be.
Sure.
Um, in the book, it's maybe less theatrical. In real life, it's very mundane.
Hmm.
But what it is, it's trying to, what I would say, get in touch with resurrection eyes, like a different perspective. So some mornings when I know I have a big day with kids, I'll go, what if today is the last day? I hope
Wow.
not. But God forbid, what if the last day I have with my daughter
Yeah.
or my sons? And I go, how would I want to treat them on their last day with them?
Hmm.
It just it's not trying to be morbid and like sad, but the reality is like everything we've ever been given will be taken from us at some
Yeah.
point,
Yeah.
and that's not up to you. And to try to control that is hubris. So it's accepting that, but also going like, but this is how I really just want to treat somebody I love. And
Yeah.
so how can I get in touch with that again?
Yeah.
So there's like a relational thing. My parents are in their 70s. Hopefully they have more time, but I'm very aware now. I'm like, every time I see them, I'm like, this is maybe my last time I see them. And even though they're drinking the Kool-Aid from the right, in a lot of ways, that's really frustrating to me, or just the Kool-Aid of mass media.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we could have plenty of arguments. I just am like, I don't care as much as like, I want to love you and be grateful for your presence in my life. But then, so there's relationally, and then in just like work and stuff, I also go, I'm, and I've worked hard to get to a spot where I can just choose what I want to do. I mean, I have to make sure it's profitable, but like, if something comes to me like an offering and I go, okay, this would take like 3 months to do. If after this project I died and it was like
Mhm.
the last thing I worked on, would I be okay with that?
Yeah.
Obviously, if I was going to die in 3 months, I wouldn't do anything for anybody. I would just be like, I'm going to travel and look at the mountains and, but uh, but what it helps me to do goes, yes, I would be okay with that because I think it's a good thing.
Mm.
But if I go, no, well, then I go, well, what would I rather been doing?
Yeah.
And then I go, I would rather have been doing this.
Mhm.
Then the question is, well, why aren't you doing that now?
Right.
Why are you ignoring the deepest thing in you?
Yes.
Because that is what is going to bring you to life. Well, I'm afraid. I'm scared. Okay. Okay. Legitimate feelings about something you deeply care about.
Yeah.
So, but other people who've accomplished things have worked through their fear and stuff. And you're just going to partake in just what other human beings have had to done too. But you need to, I think like this book isn't like, I would like you to get everything that you want, because there are really expensive movies about that, like Bruce Almighty and Wonder Woman
Sure.
1984,
Sure.
which are basically like, to get everything you want is not what you want.
Right. That's right.
Um, but I think what you want is you want to feel the rapturous experience of being alive.
Yes.
You want to
Yes.
be alive.
mm,
and pursuing and spending time and giving attention to what brings you to life
mm,
is the best way you can live.
mm,
Um, that'll have its own vulnerabilities and complexities and stuff like that. But
sure.
so the death practice helps me get in touch with that.
Mm,
It doesn't mean that it's not going to be a tremendously hard journey. It
right.
doesn't mean that it might not turn out the way I expected it to
Yeah.
be. It most likely will not turn out the way I expect it to be.
Yeah.
But at least I know kind of how know how to put my one foot in
Mm,
front of the other day by day by day. And when you, and, I have another practice in there, which is like, I'm on my way, which brings out, kind of gives grace to a longer timeline.
mm,
Like, I was telling somebody yesterday about, like, I'm a painter,
mhm.
and I bet most of you listening have never painted before. So you've never thought that painters make 4 versions of a painting.
Right. Wow.
Like,
Mm.
sometimes the assumption is just like, eyes roll back in your head. I did it. I'm done. And
Right.
there's a lot of painters who just like work, do one thing and then they're done with it. But if you look in the history of great artworks, there are many practice paintings before the
Mm.
paintings.
Wow.
When I was dealing with a lot of young artists in this church, because in church people are like, look, I did something and I got a trophy for participating, but how do you encourage artists to be better? I would go, this is great. I want you to do this 3 more times, because I think on the 4th time you're really going to get to something.
Yeah.
Because nobody's like, they're like, what? 4 times?
Mm.
Like, I think the same thing is about our life when applying to something. It's like, you tried it once and it didn't work out. Oh no. Why don't you try it 4 times? Why don't you? Steve Martin did stand up for 6 years before anything ever like took off for him.
Mm.
Like, he just went to clubs and did his thing and nobody laughed for
Wow.
6 years. Like, you don't know what you would accomplish in 10 years.
That's
If you
right.
think I didn't do it in a month, oh no. But if
Right.
you said, well, have you given yourself permission to see what you could do in 10 years?
Yeah.
My wife is about to like release a book. Like, Apple was like, one of the top books this year that we're excited about coming out is
Mm.
her book. Like, that's amazing.
That is unbelievable.
She's not an overnight success. She has spent a decade working with a friend.
Mm.
For 5 of those years, they never monetized their job.
Wow.
They just like kept doing it. And then it slowly started. And now she's my sugar mama. But it's like, you don't know.
Amazing.
To not give yourself to go, what could
Yeah.
I do in 10 years? I say to myself all the time, I'm like, I'm going to make my best work in my 60s,
Mm.
which means I have to make it to my 60s,
Right. Right.
which means I have to keep it up for
Right.
20 something years, or
Right.
less than that. Like, cause I want to see that greatest work then.
Yeah.
It just goes, you're on your way. Where you're at now is just where you're at now, but you don't know how it's going to turn out. I don't know. It gives that longer perspective.
Man,
Yeah.
that's so good. This is so, I can't, well, as the book is, this is also good for my soul. Like, this, like, just a bath for my soul. Where I'm like, yes, yeah, this is so, and I think, well, always, your vulnerability in terms of talking about your own life and how you approach these things, and, in terms of your art and process, is so what makes all this so, I think, accessible for all of us. I don't want to backtrack at all, but that was one of the things I did want to make sure I brought up, just because for me this was so, again, to me, part of your gift is the way you're just able to universalize things, to express, whether in words or in your
Mhm.
art, to kind of just, I know it's all art, but to just in a portable way. It's like, oh, like that's all there. And so I love so much in terms of, I've just gone back to this a lot, even from the show before having the book, but how, like, when you're trying to kind of dig your way out, trying to say yes, how always these, I just love the 3 arguments so much, because I think they're so like,
Uh-huh.
this is what's in everybody's head, and you wouldn't think that's what's
Yeah.
in everybody's head. You'd think it'd be
Yeah.
like you're imagining other people are dealing with something like way more sophisticated or
Yeah.
complex or whatever. I just love it so much that nothing's ever going to change. You suck and you're ugly, and giving up is better than trying. Dying is better than living. And I was like, oh, I just love it, because I feel like it's so complete in terms of, like, that's it. Those are the things.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the resistance. That's what you're always hearing when you're kind of in the fog. I feel like in most days, on some level or another, I'm trying to drown out a voice that's
Yeah.
saying some version of one, if not all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, those those three arguments are like being like a perspective, like the story you tell yourself, living in a massive culture of comparison, and then kind of like, do I have what it takes? How can I, what happens when things don't work out? Which, talking with you, and this is something that's not really in the book, but one of the things that I'm struggling with, because I think I'm going to go through a little season of this, is that one of the hard things as a creative, and maybe this is a human experience, is the necessity to disappear for a little bit,
Ooh, wow, yeah,
the necessity for obscurity.
right.
And I think what's really difficult now is because I live in a time where these platforms are like, please, you need to give us something today or we'll make you disappear.
That's
So
right.
there's this constant, like, I got to put something up today. I got to
Yeah.
put something up today. But like every great artist and creative
Hmm.
has had times of like removing from, stepping back, going into the silence, the desert, the background. And I'm finding that rhythm really incredibly difficult, because I actually think that I'm
Yes.
kind of like, I need to maybe do that for a little bit. It's just like step back. And there could probably, if I'm worried about like Instagram posts, I could get somebody to be like, here's all the posts for a month, go do it for me. I could do that. But I think, I don't know, do you have thoughts on that? Because there's something there, which is like the necessity to, I mean, I think about when Roar goes on his
Yeah.
hermitages and he said, I I go away to get in touch with what's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
He goes, I go into a hermitage to get back in touch with the real. And there's a thing about that.
I have thought.
I know the audience doesn't know, but we talked about a little bit about you kind of like disappearing for a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
bit. And
Sure.
I
Right.
was
Yeah,
like, yeah,
absolutely.
there's
Yeah.
that is also something that maybe happens to you,
Well, I
is
think
like,
that's right. Where you feel kind of where it just it's kind of a lot. I mean, so much I think of like life happens to us, but man, I'm just so. It's interesting because like I don't want to give a thought there that's not constructive because I mean I so believe in it. Like I mean I started probably in my early 30s where I would intentionally seek out silent retreats a couple of times a year and blah blah blah. I'm doing less of that than I ever have. It's harder to do than it's ever been. So it's not like, oh, I
yeah,
found that practice and now that's sustained me or like whatever. What I'm noticing, and I think is the unique challenge of this moment. And it's interesting. Like even you just drive by using the example of social media. Like, well, I guess I could farm out my Instagram post. Isn't it funny that even the way the algorithms work now, the way the machine works, it's like that the oh Lord, I think it just problem saving local backup of audio. But it looks like it's still recording.
yeah, it looks like it's still recording on my end.
Okay, well hopefully it's telling me I'm gonna have to free up more space, but I'm thinking that since this is in like a cloud, that hopefully well, that means it will exist.
Yeah.
So okay, we'll just be able to edit this. But it's just so I'm fascinated right now by the way that I feel like literally the message like the machines, like what everybody's contending with is, oh, well, if you go away, if you take that time, you mean you didn't do reels this week? Well, now you're not going to be able to get your work out to anyone. No one will see anything that you do. So good luck
Yeah.
with that. I
Yeah.
mean, I just feel
Yeah.
like the pressure has never been more direct of like,
Yeah.
if the idea is you have consistency, 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 the algorithm rewards consistency. You have to keep putting yourself out there or no one's going to see it. We'll make sure no one sees it.
Yeah.
And in the midst of that, to be telling people like, no, like you need to be able to step away. You can't constantly, you can't be output, output, output all the time. I just thought that's never been a more countercultural message than it is in this precise technological
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. And all of that's driven by dollars, advertising money. So it's not even, it's like a way to connect as human beings, but we're going to
Right.
force this non-human rhythm on you.
Yes.
Um, and it's exhausting. I was talking to somebody who lives in LA, and they know lots of like influencers, and they're like 100% of all of them are like, it's so exhausting. I'm
Mm,
so exhausted of just trying to put something up all the time.
yeah.
Which we could decide as a society we don't want to do this anymore,
Sure.
which a lot of people are.
That's true.
But there is this, you and I are like, yeah, but we're making stuff, and the reality is you won't get a book deal if you don't have some kind of audience
That's
that's
right.
looking at what you're doing. So I think there's I mean, I'm just navigating that for myself right now. This is not, I just was
Yeah.
curious if you had thoughts on it. But that's so true about the rhythms and stuff. I do think maybe it's less of like, maybe there's times in your life where you go away for like half a year
Yeah. Yeah.
or a year. Maybe there's times you just go, hey, every month I need like 3 or 4 days, or,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
and that is maybe I mean, God forbid we would just have a Sabbath, right? But like, like it's just, it's more of those kinds of, I think in the larger thing about like with tying into this book, this is not a non sequitur. I just think like sometimes you're in seasons where you're being asked to disappear. And then sometimes you're in seasons where you are asked to appear.
Yeah.
And that's also something you need to be attentive to, because that's happening as well. So,
I think it's well, and because I didn't mean to just say something that sounded pessimistic or something, but I think that where it really comes full circle for me of things you talk about in the book is that one, some of the stuff we talk about, Catherine Dowling sings Grace and Dying and all that, is that I feel like now more than ever to take that kind of time and space is going to feel like a simulation of dying.
yes.
Because it's like to go, and I think I've experienced somewhat that way, that like to go
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Oh, well, to what is it to be? That sounds so morbid. What is it to be dead than to be forgotten? Oh, and you do. It's like, I'm sort of watching the world move on without me. Though the world does go on without me. That's
This is
that's not
that
fun for a moment, but I think there's a way that it's also liberating of like, oh, the world goes on without me. I think there's something of that we actually need to see.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, that movie Coco, that Disney Pixar, that's like there's two deaths. You physically die, but then you really disappear when the last person who is alive forgets you.
Yeah.
That's when you ultimately die. So it's in there. It's like it's not even physical death. It's like the deeper fear of death is when nobody remembers you.
Right. Man. Man.
And that is like stepping away feels like
Still.
initiating that deeper death, not the physical death, but the deeper death of like being forgotten.
Yeah.
Woo! I got to think about that one for
Jeez,
a bit.
I know, like,
That is.
So on that note,
On that note, everybody, enjoy your latte.
man, seriously though, I just think, but even this, it is funny how even the heaviest stuff to talk about with you, and I felt that way in the book, feels light
Yeah.
precisely because it's like, yeah, that's the real stuff. That's actually that's what I need to hear. That's what's happening in my soul. These are
Yeah.
that's where I feel like just being, you can just feel the permission. I feel like on these tour dates of in the room, people being able to breathe and like, oh, I'm not the only one, and it's okay. It's okay to be to be immortal who's dealing with questions
it's
of
okay to be immortal.
dying,
Exactly.
to be alive and flourishing, and like,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I mean that was my goal, is trying to make something that feels like, oh, me too, and then also, like you too. We can talk about this here, and then something that's helpful along the way, and fun. And how do you talk? I mean, my favorite things, the hardest things talked about are best received through a joke and through a
That's right.
story and through a time like that. And so I wanted to offer that. I want to participate in that. So yeah, there's that.
Well,
I hope to keep doing it, and yeah, but I'm glad you got to be there for that one, and to see the book, and it's been a fun journey.
Well, and I'm going to keep this book again. I will keep saying, I think this is the kind of art that like keeps people alive. It makes you want to be here. It makes you want to say yes to one more day. Yes to what's next. Yes to your own life. I don't know what could be a higher function, a higher vocation for any art than to make you want to say yes to your own life. And so thank you for being out here doing this for us, my friend. It really, it means so much more than you know.
Oh man. Well, thanks. I received that. Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate it.
So grateful for you in this conversation. We have to do this again soon.
Yeah, we will. We will. In person or on this again.
Absolutely. We'll yeah. What's the best way for people to stay connected with what you're doing and what's happening next and all that?
Well, I'm most active on Instagram. I mean, I'm Scott the Painter on all socials, so I try to tap into each one of those. Although there could be horrible things said about me on Facebook, and I have not checked in for
I
a
know.
long
I
time.
find out like 6 months later. Oh, Aunt Cindy's not dated me for a long time.
But yeah, I'm there. And then the book is available everywhere, but I'm also trying to do a number of show dates this year to kind of finish off this work. My goal is to like film it really well. And then I'll be like, here's a book, here's a video. And then I have some other things I'd like to move on to. So I'm coming to a city near you. So just keep
Yes,
track on Instagram. And I even have like an email list you can get to. But yeah, there you go.
brilliant, my friend. Well, thank you so much. And as always,
Thanks, Jonathan. It's been fun seeing you and talking with you.
so good to see you. Love you so much. And can't
Love
wait
you
to
too
catch
so
you again
much.
soon.